At her sister's wedding, Clara Whitmore was invited to be humiliated before London society. Then Edmund Ashcombe, the reclusive Duke of Ravensmere, stepped forward with a kindness no one expected and no one could explain. Clara could not trust his heart, especially when an old family secret connected his gesture to her own hidden suffering. Yet, beneath their guarded silence, two wounded souls began moving dangerously close to love. 3 weeks earlier, Edmund Ashcombe had stood alone in the West Library of Ravensmere, watching rain gather against the tall windows. The estate had been built to impress strangers, but Edmund had long ago stopped caring what strangers thought of it. To him, Ravensmere was not a monument to nobility. It was a responsibility of stone, timber, unpaid accounts, and memories that refused to fade. A fire burned low in the grate. On the desk before him lay 3 unopened invitations from London, each bearing the crests of families who considered his absence an insult. Beside them rested a smaller envelope, its paper yellowed with age. That letter was the reason he had not yet returned it to the locked desk. The seal had belonged to his father. Edmund had found it that morning, beneath a false panel, while searching for old estate records. He had recognized the handwriting immediately. The late Duke's script had always been precise, controlled, and impossible to read emotionally. Even in private letters, his father had written like a man addressing a court. Edmund had opened the envelope only far enough to see one name, Whitmore. He had not read further. For 12 years, he had avoided every unfinished matter connected to his father. There had been too many of them, and each seemed to carry the same warning. Duty did not end when a man died. It simply passed into the hands of the son. A knock sounded at the door. Enter. His steward, Mr. Bellamy, stepped inside, carrying a leather folder. He was a practical man in his 50s, with silver hair and the expression of someone who had spent years delivering unwelcome truths to powerful people. The Western tenants have accepted the revised terms, Bellamy said, but the southern boundary remains disputed. By whom? The Whitmores. Edmund's gaze returned to the old envelope. Bellamy noticed the movement, but said nothing. Their solicitor claims the boundary stones were moved before your father's death. If the claim is accepted, several acres of Ravensmere woodland will be affected. Have they provided evidence? Only a statement from the late Mrs. Whitmore. Edmund's hand stilled over the folder. Their daughter is handling the matter now, Bellamy continued. Miss Clara Whitmore. The name meant nothing to him at first. Then he remembered seeing it years before, on a charitable ledger, written in a young woman's careful hand. Clara Whitmore had organized food deliveries during a harsh winter when most of the county's wealthier families had been away in London. He remembered the name because his father had crossed it out. Send word that I will review the claim personally, Edmund said. Bellamy hesitated. You intend to meet her? I intend to settle a boundary dispute. Of course. After the steward left, Edmund remained beside the window. He unfolded the letter at last. The first line was short. My dear son, if this reaches you, then I have failed to correct a wrong that should never have been permitted to stand. Edmund read no farther. He folded the letter again and placed it beneath the ledger. Outside, the rain darkened the lawns, and the bare branches scraped against the glass like restless fingers. Edmund had spent years believing that his father's greatest failure had been the silence surrounding his younger son's death. Now he wondered whether there had been another silence, one that had harmed a family he had never met. And for the first time in many years, the quiet of Ravensmere felt less like peace than an accusation. Clara Whitmore had learned early that a woman could disappear while standing in the middle of a crowded room. At her sister's wedding preparations, she moved from one task to another without being asked. She checked the flower arrangements, corrected the seating list, soothed a nervous maid, and found the missing pearl clasp from her mother's traveling case. No one thanked her. Her mother merely complained that Clara's hands smelled of dust from the storage room. You ought to have taken greater care with your appearance, Mrs. Whitmore remarked as Clara entered the morning room. The wedding guests will notice you. They have noticed me before, Clara replied gently. Her mother frowned, uncertain whether the answer had been insolent. Clara wore a pale blue gown that had belonged to her younger cousin. The sleeves had been altered, the hem repaired, and the faded ribbon replaced. It was respectable, though hardly fashionable. Her younger sister, Beatrice, had chosen ivory silk embroidered with tiny seed pearls. Beatrice was standing before the mirror, admiring the effect. "Mother says you will sit near the rear of the chapel," she said. "It will be less embarrassing if people do not compare us." Clara adjusted the clasp at her wrist. "I had not realized we were being compared." Beatrice smiled at the mirror. "Everyone compares sisters." "No," Clara said, "only families who wish to rank them." The room went quiet. Beatrice turned, her expression sharpening. She had always possessed the kind of beauty that encouraged forgiveness. Clara had never been granted the same allowance. Whatever she said was weighed carefully, then remembered. "You should be grateful to attend," Beatrice said. "Some women never receive invitations once they become difficult to place." Clara understood the meaning. Unmarried, nearly 30. Neither young enough to be romantic nor old enough to be pitied without discomfort. Her mother began discussing the guest list, and Clara stepped toward the window. Beyond the glass, the garden was blurred by mist. She had spent years imagining a life beyond her family's house, but every path seemed to lead back to the same expectations. Care for the household. Protect the family's reputation. Do not complain. Do not hope for too much. A footman entered with a letter. For Miss Whitmore. Clara recognized the handwriting of the Whitmore solicitor. She opened it while her mother and sister continued speaking. The contents were brief. The family's debts had increased. The southern property could not be sold while the boundary dispute remained unresolved. If Clara wished to preserve the house, she would need to negotiate with Ravensmere. She read the final sentence twice. "The Duke of Ravensmere has agreed to review the matter himself." Edmund Ashcombe. She had heard of him, as everyone had. A duke who rarely attended assemblies, a man who had refused 3 highly advantageous marriages, an aristocrat who spent more time among estate ledgers than among people. Some called him proud, others called him damaged. Clara had never met him, but she suspected that both descriptions were incomplete. "Is that bad news?" Beatrice asked. "Only another responsibility. You make everything sound so tragic." Clara folded the letter. "And you make everything sound effortless." Beatrice's smile vanished. Before either woman could answer, the church bells began to ring in the distance. The wedding carriage had arrived. Clara slipped the letter into her reticule and followed her family outside. The air smelled of rain and roses. Guests gathered beneath black umbrellas, their voices bright with anticipation. Beatrice climbed into the carriage first. Her mother followed. Clara paused with one gloved hand on the door. Across the drive, a dark carriage had stopped near the gate. Its crest was unfamiliar to most of the guests, but Clara recognized the black raven worked into the silver shield. Ravensmere. The carriage door opened. A tall man stepped down, dressed entirely in black. He did not look toward the wedding party immediately. His attention moved instead across the house, the gardens, and the distant fields, as if he were measuring the weight of everything he had inherited. Then his eyes found Clara. The moment lasted only a second. Still, Clara felt strangely exposed, not admired, not judged, but seen. Edmund Ashcombe looked away first. Clara entered the carriage, unaware that the Duke had recognized the name on the letter in her hand, and unaware that by sunset his father's unfinished secret would place them both in danger. The chapel had been decorated with white roses, pale ribbons, and enough candlelight to make every polished surface gleam. Clara sat near the rear, exactly where Beatrice had instructed, with her hands folded quietly in her lap. From that distance, she could see almost everyone. The bride's family occupied the front pews. Their expressions were bright with satisfaction, as though Beatrice's marriage had restored a balance that Clara's existence had somehow disturbed. Across the aisle, Edmund Ashcombe sat alone. He had arrived without a companion and had spoken to no one except the bride's father. His presence gave the ceremony a gravity it had not possessed before. Even those who pretended not to watch him kept glancing in his direction. Clara tried not to do the same. The wedding began. Beatrice walked toward the altar beneath a veil of embroidered silk, and the congregation turned to admire her. Clara watched her sister's face brighten when the groom took her hand. For one brief moment, Clara allowed herself to feel happy for her. Then Lady Winthrop leaned toward the woman beside her and whispered loudly enough to be heard. "Poor Miss Whitmore, imagine sitting behind your own sister at such an age." A few people smiled. Clara kept her eyes forward. The ceremony continued, but the words seemed to drift past her. She had endured remarks like that for years. They were usually delivered in drawing rooms, behind fans, or beneath the protective noise of polite conversation. Today, they were offered openly, as though the wedding had granted everyone permission to speak without consequence. When the vows were finished, the guests gathered beneath the church portico. Rain had begun to fall, fine and silver beneath the gray sky. Clara stood near one of the columns, while her mother spoke with a group of ladies. "You must be relieved," Mrs. Whitmore was saying. "At least one of my daughters has secured a proper future." Clara felt several heads turn. Beatrice, still holding her bouquet, lowered her voice. "Mother, perhaps we should not discuss family matters here." "Why not? Clara is accustomed to hearing the truth." A gentleman near them gave a restrained laugh. Another examined the rain with sudden interest. Clara's fingers tightened around her reticule. "My future has never been a subject requiring public concern," she said. Her mother's eyes narrowed. "You have always been too sensitive." "No," Clara replied. "I have simply been listening." That answer created a silence more uncomfortable than any insult. Beatrice's smile became strained. "Clara, do not spoil my wedding by making a scene." "I have not made one." "You are standing there, looking offended." "I was not aware that my expression belonged to you." Someone behind them laughed. This time the sound was unmistakable. Beatrice's cheeks flushed. "Perhaps you should return home before the reception. It would spare everyone the discomfort of explaining your circumstances to the guests." The words were cruel, but what hurt Clara most was how calmly her sister delivered them. Her mother touched Beatrice's arm. "Do not be unkind." Yet she did not defend Clara. Clara stepped away from them. Her shoes struck the wet stone as she moved toward the garden path. She intended to find a quiet room in the vicarage where she could compose herself before the reception. She would not cry. She had promised herself that long ago. The rain gathered on her lashes. She had reached the garden gate when a voice stopped her. "Miss Whitmore." She turned. The Duke of Ravensmere stood a few feet away. He had removed his gloves, though he still held them in one hand. His expression revealed nothing, but his gaze moved briefly to the rain-soaked path behind her. "You are leaving," he said. "I am considering it." "Because of what was said?" Clara lifted her chin. "Your Grace, I am surprised you noticed." "I notice more than people assume." "Then you must have heard that my presence has become inconvenient." "I heard that your sister wished to avoid embarrassment." Clara gave a small, humorless smile. She succeeded. Edmund studied her. He did not offer the usual reassurance. He did not say that she should ignore unkind people or that she was too dignified to be hurt by them. Instead, he removed his coat. Clara stared at him. "What are you doing?" "The rain is worsening." "I can see that. You cannot walk to the vicarage dressed as you are." "I have walked through rain before. Not in silk slippers." His tone was calm, almost practical. That made the gesture more confusing, not less. Edmund extended the coat toward her. Clara did not take it. "Why?" she asked. His hand remained outstretched. "Why what?" "Why are you helping me?" For the first time, something changed in his expression. It was not surprise. It was the brief shadow of a memory. "Because you are cold. That cannot be the whole reason." "No," he admitted. "It is not." The answer disturbed her more than a denial would have done. A carriage waited near the drive. One of Edmund's servants stood beside it, watching discreetly. Clara looked at the coat, then at the Duke. If I accept this, people will talk. People are already talking. That does not mean I should give them another reason. His gaze held hers. You are concerned about my reputation? I am concerned about yours being used against me. The words escaped before she could soften them. Edmund lowered the coat slightly. You believe I am capable of that? I believe powerful men are often kind when kindness serves them. For a moment, the rain seemed louder than the voices gathering beneath the portico. Then Edmund placed the coat around her shoulders, without touching her more than necessary. The wool was warm from his body. Its scent carried cedar, rain, and something faintly smoky. Clara stepped back immediately. There, he said. Now you may leave without catching a chill. And what does my gratitude cost? His eyes sharpened. Nothing. No favor? None. No obligation? Not from you. The final words were quiet, but they struck her with unexpected force. Edmund turned toward the carriage. Clara remained beneath the garden arch, wrapped in the coat of a duke whose motives she could not understand. She should have returned it at once. She should have refused every kindness he offered. Instead, she followed him. The reception was held at the Whitmore house, where every room had been opened to the guests. Music drifted from the ballroom, and servants carried trays of champagne through clusters of laughing aristocrats. Clara returned Edmund's coat to a footman before entering. She had changed into a dry pair of shoes, but the damp had left her hair slightly loosened at the temples. Beatrice found her near the library door. You followed the Duke from the garden, she said. I walked beside his carriage. That is worse. I did not ask for his assistance. But you accepted it. Clara looked toward the ballroom. Edmund stood near one of the tall windows, speaking with Beatrice's father. He appeared as distant as ever, but Clara could not forget the warmth of his coat around her shoulders. Beatrice lowered her voice. Do you imagine he is interested in you? No. Good, because men like the Duke do not notice women like us unless they want something. Clara's gaze moved back to Edmund. You seem certain he wants something. I am certain that no one acts without a reason. That was precisely what Clara feared. Before she could respond, Beatrice's new husband approached. He was handsome, polished, and already slightly intoxicated by the admiration surrounding him. Clara, he said, your sister tells me the Duke has taken an interest in your family's boundary dispute. His Grace is reviewing it. How noble of him. The young man smiled toward the ballroom. Perhaps you might persuade him to be generous. A woman's pleading can accomplish what legal arguments cannot. Several guests nearby heard him. Clara felt the old humiliation return, familiar and suffocating. I believe His Grace prefers facts, she said. Then you must provide them. I intend to. Do you? Beatrice asked. You have spent years managing household accounts. Surely you understand how desperate our situation has become. Clara looked at her sister. I understand it better than anyone. Then stop pretending this dispute is about principle. A quiet movement near the window caught Clara's attention. Edmund had stopped speaking with their father. He was watching them. Beatrice noticed and smiled. Perhaps you should ask him directly. I will discuss the matter when it is appropriate. Of course, you always prefer waiting until someone else solves the problem. The room seemed to contract around Clara. She turned toward the library, needing distance from the music and the watching faces, but before she reached the door, Edmund spoke. Miss Whitmore. His voice was not loud, yet the nearby conversations faded. Clara turned. Your Grace? I would like to discuss the boundary records. Her sister's expression changed at once. Now? Beatrice asked. Now. Edmund's gaze remained on Clara. If Miss Whitmore is willing. Clara should have refused. The invitation carried risk. A private conversation with a duke during her sister's wedding would become gossip by morning. But she was tired of allowing other people to decide where she stood. I am willing. Edmund opened the library door. As Clara stepped inside, she noticed a faint trace of ink on his right hand, as though he had recently been writing a letter he did not wish anyone to read. The door closed behind them. And for the first time, They stood alone with the question neither was ready to ask. Was his kindness meant to protect her, or to hide the truth? The library was quieter than the ballroom, though the music still reached them through the closed doors in a softened, distant murmur. Clara remained near the entrance. Edmund stood beside the writing desk, where several maps had been arranged beneath the light of a green-shaded lamp. "You said you wished to discuss the boundary records," she said. "I do." "Then I hope you will forgive me if I remain standing." His eyes lifted from the papers. "You believe I intend to frighten you. I believe a woman is wise to remain near an exit when alone with a man she scarcely knows." A flicker of something almost like amusement touched his face. "That is sensible. I have rarely been accused of being sensible when my family is present." Edmund gestured toward the maps. "The southern boundary was altered before my father's death. Your family's claim is valid." Clara crossed the room cautiously. "You are certain?" "I have reviewed the original survey." "Then the land belongs to the Whitmores." "It does." She studied him. "That is not what your solicitor told my family." "My solicitor was instructed to defend the estate. I have instructed him differently." The answer was so simple that it unsettled her. "Why?" "Because the claim is yours. You could have contested it." "I could have. And no one would have blamed you, not publicly." "Perhaps not." Clara looked down at the map. The disputed land included a narrow strip of woodland and a small cottage that had once belonged to her mother. If the claim were accepted, her family could sell part of the property and settle their debts. "You have saved us from ruin," she said. "No, I have corrected a boundary. The distinction may be important to you, but not to my family." Edmund folded his hands behind his back. "I did not do it for your family." The words were quiet. Clara looked up. "Then for whom?" He did not answer immediately. Beyond the windows, rain tapped against the glass. The sound reminded her of the garden, his coat around her shoulders, and the strange seriousness in his voice when he had said she owed him nothing. "I do not know," he said at last. Clara's breath caught. It was not the sort of answer a duke was expected to give. Powerful men were supposed to know precisely why they acted. They were not supposed to admit uncertainty to women who had every reason to distrust them. "You do not know why you helped me?" "I knew why I defended you," Edmund said. "I did not know why I could not simply walk away." His honesty unsettled her more deeply than any polished declaration might have done. She moved closer to the desk. "Perhaps you felt pity." "I have pitied many people. I have not altered estate boundaries for them." "Perhaps you felt guilty." His expression changed. Clara saw it then, the brief tightening around his eyes, the way his fingers pressed against his sleeve. "Guilt is a dangerous word," he said. "So is kindness." For a moment, neither spoke. Edmund turned toward the window. "My younger brother died 12 years ago." Clara had heard the rumor, as had everyone in the county. The Duke's brother had been involved in a scandal involving a married woman, a duel, and a debt no one discussed openly. "I am sorry," she said. "You need not be. You did not know him." "No, but I know what it is to lose someone while still being expected to continue as though nothing has changed." Edmund looked back at her. Clara had not intended to reveal that. Her father had not died, but after her mother's illness, Clara had watched the woman who once held the family together disappear slowly into weakness. Afterward, everyone had expected Clara to take her place without complaint. "You cared for your mother," Edmund said. "How did you know?" "Your solicitor mentioned it in a letter concerning the boundary." The explanation was reasonable, yet Clara noticed the softness in his voice. "She was ill for many years," Clara said. "By the end, she could not remember which rooms belonged to her, but she remembered music. I used to play for her in the evenings." "What did you play?" "Anything I could manage." "Were you good?" Clara smiled faintly. "No, but she never complained." Edmund's gaze lowered to the papers. "My brother used to play the violin badly." "Did you complain?" "Constantly." "Then perhaps he was less fortunate than my mother." The corner of his mouth moved. It was not quite a smile, but it was the first expression Clara had seen that seemed to belong entirely to him. The sight made her forget, for a moment, that he was a duke. They discussed the boundary for another quarter of an hour. Edmund asked her questions rather than giving orders. Clara explained which portions of the property her family still used and which could be leased without harming the tenants. He listened with such concentration that she found herself speaking more freely than she had intended. When they returned to the ballroom, the music had changed. Couples moved across the polished floor while the guests watched from the edges. Beatrice approached at once. Was the matter settled? Yes, Clara said. And? His Grace has agreed that our claim is valid. Beatrice stared at her. You persuaded him? I presented the records. Of course. Her sister's eyes moved to Edmund. You must have been very convincing. The implication was unmistakable. Clara felt heat rise beneath her collar. Edmund stepped forward before she could respond. Miss Whitmore did not persuade me. The evidence did. His voice carried across the nearest group of guests. Beatrice's smile faltered. Edmund turned to Clara. You should see the full survey at Ravensmere. There are documents in my father's collection that may be relevant. The invitation was practical, entirely proper. Yet Clara heard the question beneath it. Would she trust him enough to come? I will consider it, she said. I hope you will. Then he bowed and returned to the edge of the room. Clara watched him go, wondering why his approval felt more dangerous than her family's cruelty. The following morning, Clara found Edmund's message waiting beside her breakfast plate. He had arranged for the surveyor's records to be brought to Ravensmere. She was invited to inspect them at her convenience. Her mother read the note over Clara's shoulder. You cannot go alone, she said. I will take Mrs. Finch. The housekeeper? She is more trustworthy than most members of this family. Her mother ignored the remark. People will assume the Duke is courting you. People assume whatever entertains them. You are not in a position to encourage such talk. Clara folded the note. I am not encouraging anything. But that afternoon, as the carriage carried her toward Ravensmere, she wondered whether she was going because of the records or because Edmund had asked her to come. The Duke received her in the library. This time, the room felt different, perhaps because she had entered by choice. Edmund stood beside a table covered with documents. He wore no formal coat, only a dark waistcoat and a white shirt rolled slightly at the wrists. The absence of ceremony made him seem less distant, though not less difficult to read. Miss Whitmore, he said. Your Grace. Mrs. Finch. The housekeeper curtsied and took a seat near the fire. Her presence made the meeting respectable, but Clara suspected Edmund had expected her to bring someone. I have marked the relevant records, he said. You have done all this yourself? I prefer to know what I am signing. That must make estate management exhausting. It is less exhausting than discovering someone has made decisions in my name. The words carried a bitterness Clara did not question. They worked side by side until the light faded. Edmund did not treat her as a guest who needed amusing. He treated her as an intelligent woman whose judgment mattered. When Clara reached for a ledger, their hands touched. Neither moved immediately. Edmund looked at her fingers resting beside his. The contact lasted no more than a heartbeat, but it changed the air between them. Clara withdrew first. I apologize, he said. For touching a ledger? For making you uncomfortable? You did not. That answer seemed to trouble him. A gust of wind struck the windows. The fire shuddered, and Mrs. Finch rose to secure the curtains. One of the papers on the table slipped to the floor. Clara bent to retrieve it. The page had been folded in half. On the outside was a name written in the late Duke's hand. Eleanor Whitmore. Her mother's name. Clara looked at Edmund. His face had gone completely still. What is this? She asked. Edmund crossed the room and took the paper from her hand. He folded it again, too carefully. An old record. It bears my mother's name. I know. Why? He did not answer. Clara rose slowly. You said the documents concerned the boundary. Is that true? Yes. Only the boundary? Edmund's silence answered before he did. Clara stepped away from the table. You already knew my mother. I knew of her. That is not what I asked. His gaze met hers, and for the first time she saw something close to fear. Not fear of her anger. Fear of what the truth might do once spoken. I need time, he said. Clara's disappointment was sharper than it should have been. She had come prepared to distrust his kindness, but she had not expected to feel betrayed by his silence. Time for what? To understand what my father concealed. And while you investigate, I am expected to accept your assistance without question. No. Then what am I expected to do? Edmund looked down at the folded paper in his hand. Trust that I will tell you when I know the truth. Clara gathered her gloves. That is difficult, Your Grace. Why? Because I have spent my entire life being asked to trust men who had already decided I did not deserve the truth. She walked toward the door. Behind her, Edmund said her name. Clara stopped, but she did not turn. I did not invite you here to deceive you. Perhaps not. Clara. It was the first time he had spoken her name without her title. She turned then. Edmund stood beside the desk, the old letter hidden beneath his hand. His expression was controlled, but his voice was not. I do not know what my father did, he said, but I know I do not wish to repeat it. Clara held his gaze. Then begin by not deciding for me what I can bear to hear. She left the room before he could answer. Outside, the evening sky had darkened over Ravensmere. As the carriage carried her away, Clara pressed one gloved hand against her heart, angry that it was beating with something more complicated than suspicion. Inside the library, Edmund unfolded the letter again. The next line waited beneath his father's confession. Eleanor Whitmore was promised justice, but I lacked the courage to give it to her. And below that, in a second hand Edmund did not recognize, were 4 words that made the past suddenly far more dangerous. Her daughter must never know. For the next 10 days, Clara tried to return to the life she had known before Ravensmere. She resumed her household duties, reviewed the accounts, and accompanied her mother on visits that left no room for honest conversation. Yet every ordinary task seemed touched by the memory of Edmund's library. She remembered the way he had listened, the hesitation in his voice when he spoke her name, the old letter hidden beneath his hand. Most of all, she remembered that he had not tried to stop her when she demanded the truth. That restraint troubled her almost as much as his kindness. The boundary dispute was settled formally by the end of the week. Ravensmere surrendered the disputed acres, and the Whitmores were permitted to sell the woodland to settle their debts. Clara's family praised the Duke's generosity, but no one mentioned that the decision had been based on evidence. Her father merely said, "You should write and thank him." "I have already done so." "Then write again." A duke should not be made to wonder whether his efforts are appreciated. Clara looked up from the account book. His efforts were not made for gratitude. Her father frowned. "You speak as though you know his intentions." "No," she said. "That is the difficulty." On the following Saturday, a storm damaged the eastern cottages on the Whitmore property. Several families were left without proper shelter, and Clara spent the afternoon organizing blankets, food, and temporary rooms in the old coach house. By sunset, her dress was damp at the hem, and her hands ached from carrying supplies. She had just finished speaking with a tenant's wife when a familiar carriage stopped beyond the gate. Edmund stepped down before his servant could open the door. Clara watched him cross the muddy yard. He wore a dark traveling coat, but the rain had already gathered on his shoulders. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "Bellamy informed me of the damage. You came to inspect the cottages?" "I came to assist. We have enough assistance." Edmund glanced toward the coach house, where several children sat near the fire. "You have organized this without a single trained steward." "I have organized it because no one else did." "I am not questioning your ability." "Then why are you here?" His gaze settled on her face. "Because you should not be doing all of this alone." Clara felt the familiar instinct to reject the offer before it became an obligation. "I am not alone," she said. There are tenants helping. You are still carrying more than they should ask of you. Your Grace, I am accustomed to carrying what others leave behind. The words were sharper than she intended. Edmund seemed to understand that they were not directed only at him. He removed his gloves. Then allow me to carry something. Before she could object, he turned toward the damaged cottages and began speaking with the tenants. He listened to their concerns, inspected the broken beams, and gave clear instructions to the men who had arrived with him. He did not command from a distance. He worked beside them. Clara saw him lift a fallen plank from the doorway of one cottage. Mud stained the sleeve of his coat. A young boy approached him hesitantly, holding a wooden wheel broken in two. "My father says it cannot be mended," the boy said. Edmund examined the toy. "Your father is wrong." The boy looked hopeful. "It can be repaired," Edmund continued, "but not tonight. Bring it to Ravensmere tomorrow, and I will see what can be done." The boy smiled and ran away. Clara found herself watching Edmund with an attention she could no longer pretend was merely practical. He noticed. "You are staring," he said. "I am wondering whether dukes often repair children's toys. Only when the toys are beyond the abilities of their servants. That is a convenient distinction. It is an honest one." The rain strengthened. Edmund looked toward the road. "You should return inside. So should you. I am not the one standing without a cloak. You are the one standing in the rain as though you believe it cannot touch you." He regarded her for a long moment. "Perhaps I have believed that about many things." Something in the admission quieted her. They moved beneath the overhang of the coach house. The others were occupied with the children and supplies, leaving them momentarily apart from the noise. Clara offered him a clean cloth for his hands. He accepted it, though their fingers brushed again. This time, neither pretended not to notice. "You have a habit of appearing whenever I am in difficulty," Clara said. "And you have a habit of being in difficulty without asking for help. I do not ask, because help is rarely given without a price." Edmund dried his hands slowly. "What price do you believe I want?" "That is precisely what I cannot determine." He folded the cloth. "You think I am hiding something. I know you are." His expression tightened. "The letter," she continued. "My mother's name. Your father's handwriting. You cannot expect me to forget it, simply because you have been useful." "I do not expect that." "Then tell me." "Not yet." "Why?" "Because I am afraid the truth will make you despise me." Clara had not expected that answer. "Your Grace, I barely know you." "Perhaps that is why your opinion matters." The words passed between them with the force of a confession neither had intended to make. Clara looked away first. Beyond the yard, the storm blurred the world into silver and gray. "People say you do not care what anyone thinks," she said. "People say many things because it comforts them to believe a man is simple. And are you?" "No." She gave a faint smile. "That much I had noticed." For the first time, Edmund smiled fully. It was brief, unguarded, and so unexpectedly warm that Clara felt something within her shift. Then he stepped away. The distance he created was deliberate. That was when Clara understood the danger. He was not unaware of what was growing between them. He was aware and resisting it. The next morning, Edmund found the broken wooden wheel on his desk. He had repaired it himself before dawn. A note lay beneath it in Clara's handwriting. "You were right. It could be mended." He read the sentence twice, before placing the toy beside the letter from his father. For the first time, the two objects seemed connected in his mind. One represented a wound he could repair, the other a wound he might have inherited. That afternoon, Edmund summoned Bellamy. "Arrange for the Whitmore records to be transferred here," he said. The steward looked surprised. "All of them?" "All that concern the southern property." "And if Miss Whitmore asks why?" "Tell her the truth." Bellamy paused. "Which truth, Your Grace?" Edmund's gaze moved toward the rain-streaked window. "That I am no longer certain the boundary dispute is the most important matter between our families." Meanwhile, Clara received an invitation to Ravensmere for a small gathering of tenants and estate officials. It was not a social event. and Edmund had chosen the guest list carefully. She accepted because the meeting concerned the newly restored land. At least, that was what she told herself. The gathering took place in the old conservatory, where the glass roof turned the afternoon light pale and soft. Edmund stood near the long table, reviewing plans for repairing the cottages. Clara noticed that he had arranged the papers in sections she could easily understand. "You have made room for my notes," she said. "You have useful notes. Most men prefer not to admit that. Most men are foolish." She looked at him. "You are becoming dangerously honest." "I am becoming tired of being misunderstood." The words were spoken lightly, but the sadness beneath them was clear. They worked through the plans together. Clara proposed using local craftsmen instead of an expensive contractor from London. Edmund accepted the suggestion without hesitation. "You trust my judgment now?" she asked. "I have trusted it from the beginning." "Then why do you keep secrets from me?" "Because trust and truth are not always the same thing." She lowered her pen. "They should be." "Yes," he said, "they should." Silence settled between them. A servant entered, carrying a small wooden box. "For your grace," he said. "It was found in the old nursery." Edmund's expression changed as he recognized it. The servant placed the box on the table and left. Clara saw the crest carved into the lid. It matched the raven emblem on Edmund's carriage, but beneath it was a smaller engraving, a single letter E. "Was this your brother's?" she asked. "Yes." He opened the box. Inside lay a violin string, a brass button, and a folded sheet of music worn at the edges. Edmund touched the paper, but did not remove it. "He used to play this," he said, "badly." "The same piece you mentioned?" "Yes." "Then perhaps you should have complained more gently." "I was 17. Gentleness was not among my talents." "And now?" He looked at her. "Now I understand the value of saying what matters before it is too late." Clara's breath caught. Edmund unfolded the music. A small note had been written in the margin. "For Eleanor, when the promise is kept." Clara stepped closer. "Eleanor was my mother." "I know." "What promise?" Edmund's hand closed over the page. "I am trying to discover that, or trying to decide whether I should know." He met her gaze. "Both." The honesty was painful, but it prevented anger from becoming simple. Clara reached for the music. "Then let me help you." Edmund hesitated. She placed her hand over his. The contact was gentle, but neither withdrew. "If this concerns my mother," Clara said, "I have the right to face it." His thumb moved slightly against her glove. "And if the truth harms you, then I would rather be harmed by the truth than protected by another man's silence." Edmund's eyes darkened. For one suspended moment, the room seemed to vanish around them. Clara became aware of his nearness, the warmth beneath his hand, and the fact that his guarded expression had softened into something she could not name. He leaned toward her. Not enough to touch her lips. Enough to make the possibility real. Then the conservatory door opened. Bellamy stood on the threshold, holding a telegram. "Your Grace," he said, his voice grave. "The solicitor in London has sent word. The letter your father wrote was not the only one." Edmund released Clara's hand. The warmth disappeared. "What does the second letter contain?" he asked. Bellamy looked from the Duke to Clara. "A confession," he replied, "and a warning about Miss Whitmore's future." The telegram remained unopened on the table for several seconds. Edmund stared at it as though the folded paper possessed the power to alter the room simply by being read. Clara watched him, still aware of the place where his hand had covered hers. "A confession," she repeated, "and a warning about my future." Bellamy lowered his eyes. "That is what the solicitor wrote, Miss Whitmore. Then open it." Edmund looked at her. "You do not have to remain. I am not leaving because a letter frightens you." His jaw tightened. He broke the seal. The message was brief, written in the solicitor's hurried hand. The second letter was discovered among the late Duke's private papers. It confirms that the Whitmore property was deliberately placed under financial restriction 12 years ago. The instruction came from your father. A full confession is enclosed and should be delivered to Miss Clara Whitmore only in your presence. Beneath the telegram was a second envelope. Clara recognized the handwriting before Edmund opened it. Her mother's. The room seemed to lose its warmth. Edmund read the first page silently. His face revealed little, but his breathing changed. When he reached the end, he folded the pages together. "You must know," Clara said. He looked toward the rain-darkened glass. "My father entered an agreement with your mother before her marriage. He promised to protect the Whitmore estate after your grandfather's death." "Why would he?" "Because your grandfather had saved Ravensmere from ruin during a financial crisis. My father believed the debt could never be repaid." "And was it?" "No." Clara's fingers curled around the edge of the table. "What happened?" "My father discovered that your mother intended to sell part of the property and move abroad. He believed she was acting against the interests of the family. He used his influence to block the sale and place the estate under restrictions. He trapped her." Edmund did not deny it. "He told her the restrictions would be temporary," he said. But when she challenged him, he threatened to expose private financial records that would have destroyed her reputation. Clara's face had gone pale. "My mother never spoke of that. She may have believed silence was the only way to protect you." Clara reached for the letter. Edmund handed it to her. The page trembled in her hands. "My dear Clara," it began. Her mother had written the letter years before her death, but it had never been sent. "If you are reading this, then the truth has finally found its way to you. I wanted you to know that the failures of our family were not caused by your father's weakness or by my inability to manage the estate. We were prevented from choosing our own path. I accepted humiliation because I believed it would keep the children safe." Clara read on, tears gathering but refusing to fall. "The Duke of Ravensmere's father promised to restore what he had taken. He never did. If his son should one day discover the truth, do not punish him for a sin he did not commit, but do not allow his remorse to become another chain around your life." Clara lowered the letter. Edmund stood perfectly still. "You knew," she said. "I suspected. You knew enough to help me. I knew enough to believe your family had been wronged. I did not know the full extent of it. Yet you allowed me to believe your kindness was unrelated. I was afraid." The admission was so quiet that it almost disappeared beneath the rain. Clara looked at him. "Afraid of what?" "That you would think I had come to you because of this letter. That every gesture would appear to be repayment. That if I told you the truth, you would look at me and see only my father." "And what did you want me to see?" Edmund's expression broke, not dramatically, but in the small, painful movement of a man who had spent too long keeping everything contained. "Edmund," Clara said softly. He closed his eyes for a moment. "I wanted you to see a man who came to that wedding because he had given his word to your father," he said. "I wanted you to see that the reason I remained was not duty, it was you." The words reached her with terrible clarity. "You barely knew me. I knew enough to see how they treated you. I knew enough to see that you were trying not to let them break you. I knew enough to understand that I wanted to stand beside you even before I knew why." Clara looked down at her mother's letter. The old pain inside her had always been shaped like a question. Why had no one protected her mother? Why had no one protected Clara from becoming the caretaker of everyone else's consequences? Now the answer had arrived wearing the name of a duke. "You should have told me," she said. "I know. Your silence made your kindness feel like another form of control." He absorbed the words without defending himself. "I know that too." Clara folded the letter carefully. "I cannot remain here. Clara, I need to leave before I begin mistaking your remorse for love." The sentence hurt them both. Edmund stepped toward her, then stopped. His restraint was the very thing that had drawn her to him, and now it felt like another wall. "You believe that is what this is?" "I do not know what this is. I have tried to tell you." "You told me after the truth was placed in my hands." His face tightened. "What would you have had me do? Trust me enough to let me choose what to think." She turned toward the door. Edmund's voice followed her. Edmund's voice followed her. "If I ask you to stay, will you?" Clara paused. The question was not a command. It was not even a request made with confidence. It was the first time she had heard him ask for something he could not secure by title or authority. She closed her eyes. "No," she whispered, "because I would stay for the wrong reason." Then she left. For 3 days, Clara remained at the Whitmore house, refusing every invitation from Ravensmere. Her mother's letter had been placed in a locked drawer, though Clara read it each night before sleeping. She had expected anger to make the decision easier. Instead, anger had left her exhausted and uncertain. Edmund's words repeated themselves in her mind. "The reason I remained was not duty, it was you." She wanted to believe him. That was the danger. Her father, meanwhile, had become suddenly attentive. He asked whether she had spoken to the Duke, whether Edmund intended to pursue the property matter further, and whether Clara had considered a marriage proposal from Mr. Hargreaves, the son of a prosperous banker. "You are nearly 30, he reminded her one evening. "A sensible marriage would secure your future." "His future," Clara replied. "You mean it would secure yours?" Her father's expression hardened. "Do not be childish. I am the only person in this house who has been expected to behave like an adult. You have a duty to this family. I have fulfilled that duty for years. And now you would abandon us because a duke has shown you attention?" Clara rose from the table. "The Duke has shown me respect. That is not the same as attention. Respect from a man like him is temporary, perhaps, but dependence on men like you has lasted long enough." She left the room before he could answer. The following morning, a carriage arrived from London. Lady Ashcombe, Edmund's aunt, stepped down, wearing a dark green traveling dress and an expression of polished disapproval. She requested a private interview. Clara received her in the drawing room. "I shall be direct," Lady Ashcombe said. "My nephew has become distracted. I am sorry to hear it. You misunderstand me. His estate is under strain, and his position requires stability. He cannot afford an attachment that will invite speculation. Then you should speak to him. I am speaking to you because women are often more practical when their families depend upon them." Clara's composure sharpened. Lady Ashcombe placed a small envelope on the table. "Your father's debts will be called in within the month, unless a settlement is reached. My nephew can prevent that." Clara did not touch the envelope. "At what price?" "A quiet understanding. You will leave Ravensmere, cease correspondence with Edmund, and accept that whatever happened at the wedding was an unfortunate misunderstanding. And in exchange, my family is rescued. Your family is spared disgrace." Clara looked toward the envelope. She understood then why Edmund had feared that remorse could become another chain. His family could use the Whitmore debt exactly as her own family had used her silence. "I will not sell my future to preserve the appearance of your family's honor," she said. Lady Ashcombe's eyes cooled. "You speak as though you possess a future to sell." Clara stood. "For the first time," she replied, "I believe I do." After Lady Ashcombe departed, Clara went directly to her room and began packing. She would leave the Whitmore house. She would rent the small cottage attached to the restored woodland and establish a school for the tenants' children. It would not be a grand life, but it would belong to her. Before sunset, she wrote one final letter to Edmund. "Your Grace," she began, then crossed out the words. "Edmund." She paused. "I am grateful that you defended me, but gratitude cannot be the foundation of a marriage, and uncertainty cannot be the foundation of trust. I am leaving because I must learn who I am without my family's demands, and without the protection of your name." She stopped writing. Marriage. The word had appeared before she had permitted it. Clara folded the letter without finishing, and sealed it anyway. At Ravensmere, Edmund received it an hour later. He read the unfinished page beside the fireplace. He understood every word, including those she had not written. Bellamy entered quietly. "Lady Ashcombe has sent word," he said. "She claims Miss Whitmore has agreed to leave the county." She has not agreed to anything. She says the matter is settled. Edmund looked at the unfinished letter in his hand. No, he said, it is not. He walked to the locked desk and removed his father's confession. Beneath it lay the original promise made to Eleanor Whitmore, and a second document bearing Edmund's own seal. It was a marriage settlement his family had prepared years ago for a different woman. He tore it in half. Then he gathered the letters and stepped into the storm. For 12 years, Edmund had believed that protecting people meant deciding what they should never know. Now Clara had left because of that belief, and if he wanted any chance of finding her again, he would have to approach her without a title, without a bargain, and without a single hidden truth. By the time Edmund reached the small cottage beside the southern woodland, the storm had passed. Morning light rested softly over the wet fields. Clara stood near the garden gate with a traveling cloak around her shoulders and a small valise at her feet. She had already sent the servants away. The cottage was modest, but the windows had been repaired, and a narrow path led toward the village schoolhouse she intended to establish. She saw Edmund before he spoke. He had arrived alone, without a carriage escort or any visible sign of his rank. His boots were muddy, his coat damp, and his expression stripped of the authority he carried so naturally in every other room. Clara's heart responded before her judgment could restrain it. "You should not have come," she said. "I know. Your aunt visited me." "I know. She offered to settle my family's debts if I disappeared from your life." Edmund's face hardened. She had no right. Perhaps not, but she understood exactly how frightened I am of becoming someone's obligation. He stopped several feet away from her. "I have brought no offer," he said. "No contract, no solicitor, no promise that your family's future depends upon your answer." Clara watched him carefully. "Then why are you here?" "Because I owe you the truth without asking anything in return." He removed several folded pages from inside his coat. The papers were protected from the rain, though the edges were worn. "My father's confession," he said, "the original agreement with your mother, and a statement signed by me this morning, releasing the Whitmore property from every claim Ravensmere has ever made." Clara did not take the documents. "You could have sent them." "I could have. Why bring them yourself?" "Because I hid the truth from you once. I will not hide behind distance now." The wind moved through the trees. Edmund looked toward the cottage, then back at her. "I believed that if I repaired what my father damaged, I would become a better man. But I was wrong. Repairing a debt does not make a man noble if he uses it to control the person he intends to help." Clara's throat tightened. "You are not responsible for your father's sins." "No, but I am responsible for what I do with the power he left me." He took another step, then stopped again. "I came to the wedding because your father once helped mine. That was duty. When I saw them mock you, I defended you, because I could not bear to watch them make you smaller for their comfort. That was not duty." Clara's eyes burned. "When I invited you to Ravensmere, I told myself it was because of the records. When I went to your family's cottages, I told myself it was because the estate had an obligation to help. I kept giving my actions respectable names because I was afraid of the truth." "And what is the truth?" Edmund's voice lowered. "That I look for you whenever I enter a room. That I remember every word you say, even the ones meant to keep me away. That the thought of you leaving this county feels like the loss of something I had only just begun to understand." Clara looked down at the papers in his hand. "You do not know whether I can trust you." "No. You do not know whether I could be happy as your wife." "No. You do not even know whether I want to marry you." "I know." His acceptance disarmed her. Edmund held out the documents. "I am not asking you to become Duchess of Ravensmere today. I am not asking you to forgive me, because I have finally learned to speak plainly. I am asking you to choose your own life. If that life does not include me, I will still honor your decision." Clara stared at him. All her life, men had spoken of duty when they meant obedience. Her family had called dependence, love, and sacrifice virtue. Edmund was the first man to place a choice before her, without attaching a price. She reached for the documents. His fingers released them at once. Clara read the first page, then the second. Her mother's name appeared beside her father's old agreement. The language was formal, but the meaning was clear. The Whitmore property was free. She looked up. "You have given me back my home. I have given you what was yours. And if I choose to leave it, then I will help you sell it at a fair price. And if I choose to remain, then I will ensure the repairs are completed without interfering in your decisions." Clara gave a fragile laugh. "You have planned for every possibility except the one where I am grateful. I am prepared to endure your gratitude." She stepped closer. "Edmund," she said, "I am grateful, but I am also angry. You have every right to be. I am frightened. So am I. And I do not trust your heart yet." He looked at her with quiet steadiness. "Then, let me earn your trust." The words were simple. There was no dramatic promise, no claim that love would solve every difficulty. That was why she believed him. Clara placed the papers on the gatepost. "I will not marry you because you saved my family. I know. I will not marry you because you are a duke. I hope you will not. I will not marry you because I pity your loneliness." His expression softened. That would be unbearable. She took another step. "But I may marry you, because you are the first man who has asked what I want and waited for the answer." Edmund's breath caught. "May?" he asked. "I am still considering it." A genuine smile reached his eyes. "Then I shall remain patient." "You are not a patient man." "I am learning." Clara reached for his hand. He did not seize hers. He allowed her to place her fingers within his, as though even now he understood that the choice must remain hers. Their hands joined beneath the pale morning sky. For a while, they stood without speaking. The silence between them no longer felt like concealment. It felt like room for uncertainty, healing, and the slow construction of something neither had dared to name. Several weeks later, Clara opened the village school in the restored coach house. Children from the surrounding farms arrived with slates beneath their arms. Clara taught them reading, arithmetic, and music. She kept a small pianoforte near the window and played for them in the evenings, just as she had once played for her mother. Edmund visited often, though he never entered without knocking. He brought books, repaired broken toys, and reviewed the school's accounts only when Clara asked him to. When he did not understand her plans, he asked questions instead of issuing instructions. Their engagement was announced in autumn. London society reacted with surprise, followed by endless speculation. Some claimed Clara had trapped the Duke. Others suggested Edmund had chosen her out of guilt. A few predicted that the marriage would end as quietly as it had begun. Clara no longer cared. She had spent too many years allowing strangers to describe her life. On the morning of their wedding, Edmund waited for her beneath the old oak tree overlooking the woodland. The ceremony would be small. Clara had refused a fashionable London spectacle, and Edmund had supported her without argument. "You are late," he said when she approached. "I wanted to be certain." "Of what?" "That I was not mistaking fear for wisdom." "And have you decided?" Clara stood before him in a simple ivory gown, her mother's pearl clasp at her throat. "Yes." Edmund's expression grew solemn. "I am still afraid," she said. "But I am no longer afraid of you." He took her hand. "That is enough for today." "No," Clara replied. "It is not." She lifted her face toward him. "I am not choosing you because I need protection. I am choosing you because, beside you, I have become more fully myself." Edmund's eyes shone with emotion he no longer attempted to hide. "And I am choosing you," he said, "because you taught me that a guarded heart is not a safe heart. It is simply a lonely one." He kissed her gently beneath the autumn leaves. There was no applause, no audience, and no need for either of them to prove anything to the world. Their marriage would not erase the past. Clara would still remember the years she had been overlooked. Edmund would still carry sorrow for the brother he had lost and shame for the wrongs committed by his father. But the past no longer stood between them. It stood behind them, where it belonged. And in the years that followed, visitors to Ravensmere often remarked that the Duke seemed changed. They spoke of his greater warmth, his willingness to attend village gatherings, and the way he listened whenever the Duchess offered an opinion. What they did not understand was that Edmund had not become a different man. He had simply stopped hiding the one he had always been. As for Clara, she was never again introduced as the unmarried sister, the forgotten daughter, or the woman who had been invited only to be mocked. She became the Duchess who rebuilt a school, restored a neglected estate, and taught an entire household that kindness could be offered without possession. And whenever anyone asked how she had come to marry the reclusive Duke of Ravensmere, Clara would smile and say that it began with a gesture she could not trust. Then she would glance toward Edmund, who always seemed to know exactly what she meant. Because sometimes love does not arrive with certainty. Sometimes it begins with a question, a guarded heart, and one unexpected act of kindness. Thank you for spending these quiet hours with Clara and Edmund. If their story touched your heart, you are warmly invited to leave a like and subscribe for more clean, emotional historical romances. And when you are ready, join us for another tale of hidden feelings, difficult choices, and the kind of love that arrives when hope seems almost forgotten.